This episode of CarePoints is sponsored by TPC Systems. For over 85 years, TPC has provided full-service systems integration and communication technology solutions in healthcare, security, and educational communication systems. TPC, the Northeast's premier provider for all of your specialized system needs.
Hello, welcome to the CarePoints podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Schiff, and today I have with me Guy Meger, who is the Vayyar's Vice President and Head of the Vayyar Care Business Unit and the former Chief Technology Officer of EarlySense, Elaine Bridge, who's the former Chief Vice President Enterprise Asset Management at Mass General, and also the former Chief Nursing and Operating Officer for Partners Healthcare, Newton Wellesley Hospital, and my friend Tim O'Malley, the Vice President and Division Manager of TPC Systems Healthcare Unit and the former President and Chief Growth Officer for EarlySense. Welcome. We're going to be talking about falls in hospitals and in healthcare in general, and I'm going to start off by framing our conversation by talking about the CDC and falls in general. According to the CDC, patient falls continue to be a significant problem for hospitals and are expected to continue to be a challenge for healthcare providers. Fall rates have increased by over 25% between 2021 and 2024. The combined impact of an aging population with over 70 million baby boomers, those over 60 years of age or older, and the expected continuation of healthcare staff shortages is a troubling combination and one that begs for the implementation of technology to assist with these demographic realities. So with all that behind us, today's conversation is going to probe that, and I'm going to start with Tim. Tim, give us some perspective on the evolution of the technology relating to fall detection and fall prevention, and you come from a significant product and market background. Why don't you tell us where you sit on that?
Thanks for having us, Kenny. I think it's going to be a great discussion. If you look at the fall rates that have increased, I mean, the technology that's out there that's being used to detect patients trying to get out of bed, trying to get out of a chair within a hospital setting or even a post-acute setting, technology hasn't changed significantly. And I think that, you look at a pressure pad that has a pressure sensor built into it that the patient is either sitting on or lying on top of. And this includes, bed sensors that are built into the bed. They're pressure load cells that are being used. And there's inertia. And so as the patient starts to get out of bed, those sensors don't always pick up until after the patient's actually out of bed or out of the chair. And, if you ask most caregivers at the bedside that are taking care of these people, what they'll tell you is that great technology for letting you know the patient's already fallen. Not necessarily good technology for predicting or anticipating a fall. And so there's recent developments with technology over the past few years where you now have the ability to do much more predictive capabilities and proactive measurements so that you can predict when a patient's trying to get out of bed, trying to get out of a chair, and alert the caregiver within a time frame that they can actually get to that patient and either supervise the patient out of that situation or keep them in the bed or the chair until the more help would arise.
Great. So why don't we have Elaine tag on to that from a clinical and bedside care perspective?
Sure. And Tim, I completely agree with all that you've said and your comprehensive assessment of where we are. When I think back, early days, the technology was really just using restraints and holding patients in bed so that they didn't fall. Obviously, we've moved beyond that, progressed beyond that. We went to human sitters. We had patients with a care aide or someone sitting by them to keep them safe. That becomes very cost ineffective, and frankly, with resources as constrained as they are, a less practical, less reliable solution. And so we've turned to technology over the last two decades, maybe 2 decades plus, and seen those pads that Tim refers to that may have been built into the bed. So a bed alarm that's less sensitive, that's not timely, that doesn't necessarily pick up the event before it happens. And in fact, in many instances, you become just tired out from the alarm fatigue because the sensitivity is so far off. And in the more modern times, we're seeing technology that is much more sensitive, that's much more reliable. And the challenge is getting staff to learn how to use the technology, leverage the technology, adopt it, and get to the point where we are not only preventing, but as Tim said, predicting those patients that might be at higher fall risk before they fall.
Great, which sets the table nicely for Guy. So Guy has significant background in the more traditional side of this, but also in the evolving world of what's coming, and including some of the innovative stuff that's coming from Vayyar. So, Guy, from a technology perspective, what's your perspective of where we're at right now and what the opportunity is, and how that can be addressed from the technologies that are emerging?
So I believe we're in a verge of change, actually. I think that at first, most of technologies was independent, not connected to a network, and usually you had to rely on the sound. When you're doing something else and there is a lot of sound around you, you won't hear the alert and so on. So those technologies first has evolved to technologies that could actually reach you out when you're far down from the devices themselves. But in the recent years, we see motion towards more sophisticated technology. There is the optics, which is based on cameras and LiDAR, which are quite accurate and quite expensive. And they allow to watch the fall after the fact, to analyze, to understand how you prevent the fall next time. Some challenges with lighting conditions and wet rooms, such as the showers, and some privacy issues that are being dealt with. But the latest technology is actually the millimeter wave radar technology, and this goes back to be at the same cost that you have like pads and very cheap solutions. And the high-end radars allow you to actually create a bulb image of a human to allow you to watch, so gives you a similar capability as almost a similar capability as the camera, protect privacy, and it could see through fog and fabrics and thin curtains. So you start seeing more and more of those. You need to have it connected to, of course, much more than just the device itself. The sensing element is one part of the element, but it has to be like a full solution that allow you to have a right workflow in order to prevent falls. You should be able to see data that can really help you to intervene on time and to prevent falls, and not only getting to the arena when someone is on the floor.
So one of the themes I'm going to pick up on is that I think you used the word connected. So if we looked at how things were kind of at their most rustic, maybe there was preventative measures, but they certainly weren't enterprise technologies that were connected to other systems. And there was a lot of attention that had to be paid at a human level to things. And not that has gone away, but we can benefit greatly from the technologies that are available. And one of the things that's driven connectivity is EMR. So I'm going to go to you, Elaine, for this one. So fall detection and prevention has evolved so that it's now part of a bigger clinical communications apparatus. And the overall communication capabilities of these technologies, they're critical to it being useful in the healthcare enterprise, especially from an EHR, EMR perspective. So, Elaine, can you give us your perspective on how this fall detection prevention how it feeds into and why it's important to be connected to the Epics and Cerners of the world.
Sure. And it is extremely important to connect to whatever platform you're using as a way to identify patients at risk, communicate that risk across the entire care team. So there's awareness without exception. And we're not relying on people putting a sign outside somebody's door that the patient is at risk for fall. I also think connecting to the EHR, EMR is important from a trending perspective, from a tracking perspective, and that feeds into the opportunities for prevention and prediction. And up to this point, or probably up until the last 5 to 10 years, we didn't have that connection to our EMR. We didn't have many organizations or systems that were fully bought into an electronic health record platform. And now we do. And we really need to leverage that, take full advantage of that, and create that connectivity between the device or the technology that is identifying patients at risk or, in fact, in the act of falling or climbing out of bed or out of a chair, and making sure that that feeds into the electronic medical record for all people to see these specifics to a patient and more broadly to see what's happening from a trend and tracking perspective.
Great. And as with the last question, this sets the table well for Guy. So I wanted to ask you from a technology perspective, kind of thematically, this connectivity, shared networks, dedicated networks, 5G, cloud integration. How do all these come together in this kind of new world that we're describing?
So I think at first, every device today even has some kind of Wi-Fi capability. So it connects to the backend, it can connect to the cloud, and connects to other types of software interfaces. And the evolution is apparent. Lately, we see more and more integration between different solutions. We can see that you can collect and make it available for people outside of their workplace. People can watch it at home and see like some analytics and some data that can help them to change care. Just an example, in assisted living facility, if you can see that a person is usually getting to the toilet in a certain hour of day, and he started like using a new drug that might have higher risk for falling. So now you might offer to wait for him just before he goes to the toilet and actually prevent the fall from happening. So you wouldn't do that if you don't have the data in the right place whenever you need it. So both accumulated and aggregated and analyzed, and also like when person is in the facility and needs to get an alert, he has to get the alert like whenever he is, never mind if it's in the other room or whatever.
So let's have Tim kind of finish up on this segment. So you have been both involved on the product development side and the product marketing side, and now too on the resale side. So has anybody got this right from a product platform perspective? What should people be thinking when folks show up on their doorstep with products and services that align with the problem?
Well, I think today it's really a challenge because you have really 3+ distinct care environments that are being looked at. You have the hospital environment, you have the post-acute or alternate care, long-term care, nursing home environment, and you have the home. And all of these are going to require different technological solutions from an infrastructure perspective. The hospitals have existing networks. I think that where this will probably go is you're going to have more of a clinical communications platform that these kinds of solutions, like a fall prevention solution, hooks into that clinical communications platform, and it may include other technologies. So, for example, you might see an RTLS system tied into a clinical communications platform that communicates with the fall prevention technology to not just help identify early fallers, but maybe help the staff with automating that process in some ways. And then you layer on AI on top of that, and you now have faster, more clinical decision making from a fall prevention perspective in a healthcare environment, like a hospital, to get the staff, less involved in the running to the bed, but more involved with predicting which patients are going to be the highest risk and preventing those events from happening, essentially. When you get into the alternate care environment, which encompasses all those different places, the staff ratio to patients is so much thinner than it is in a hospital. In a hospital, you might have, four patients to one nurse or six patients to one nurse. In a post-acute environment, that could be 20 or 30 patients to one nurse. Now they have, caregivers that are more aides that can help. But still, that's a much thinner ratio of staff to patient ratios. And so the technology may have to be different in that environment in order to compensate for that. And then when you get to the home, one of the biggest areas of fall problems is in the home. And, people, my generation, the baby boom generation, we don't want to be in hospitals. We want to be at home. We want to heal at home. We want to, age at home. We don't want to be in these institutions because we don't need to be. We are people that have been kind of brought up with the technology that's out there. We have a little bit of money in our pocket. We've worked hard for whatever amount of years. And, we want to ride out the last 20 or 30 years in a comfortable environment. And so, but we're also at risk. We're at risk of a great number of falls. And so the home-based technology, the challenge becomes the infrastructure you could put in a home, a Wi-Fi network or a 5G network or a cellular network. But on top of that, it's who's going to respond. And I think that will become kind of a big challenge of the day as we go forward, because you might see evolving care models like paramedicine, where you have, fire departments and paramedics that respond locally to people that are fall risks, but based on their central surveillance of monitoring of those people. And that is being done in some communities today, and I think it's done pretty well. But the technology has to be adaptive to that kind of a care model as well. And so I think you'll see an evolution. And I think, frankly, a lot of companies that start out in healthcare medical technologies are small. And I would advise them to be very focused on which environment you want to tackle, because if you go to too many at one time, it's going to be very dilutive and it's going to take a lot longer to get into them. So.
Well, one thing I'm picking up from what you're saying, though, is that it's not baked. So a lot of people have a lot of good ideas and potentially some execution of it, but it's not. There's no one dominant approach to this. People are still kind of experimenting quite a bit. Let's shift the conversation slightly and talk about patient safety. So we just talked about the enhanced communication capability, where these connected things are being brought together so that there could be some level of centralization and some more orchestrated response, as opposed to everybody just running to the room. So Guy, let's start with you and talk about data as it relates to patient safety. So obviously, the better sensory technology, whatever approach it is, the richer the data, the more contextual stuff that can be mixed in. How does that get us to a safer environment from a patient safety perspective?
The two colleagues that I have with me, actually, we've been involved in studies at the time at Earlysense when we brought on the first technology that is contactless and has full connectivity, and we allowed to show that with the right usage of the technology and the right balance between alerts and response time, you actually are able to reduce fall by half. So it's possible to do it, and today technology allows to do even more than that. today technology allow you to look at different types of behaviors, to look at trends, and to see that something is changing, and to be proactive, and to go and see that a patient that has changed his different behavior actually need to be reassessed and need to be to have a change to his treatment program. So we see that every new data point help you to get more decisive decisions, and help you to take the right decision on time. The challenge here is to make sure that whatever kind of a dashboard you have, or a solution that brings you the decision support system, has to take in like it has to take in account that everything has to be actionable. Like, it's not only data, it has to be like understanding the mixture of data that is important enough so you have a flag, and then the caregivers can actually look into that and make some sense of what they have to change in the treatment. So for sure those things are changing, and I believe that in the soon future we'll see more and more preventive approaches than responsive approaches to treatment of patients.
Well, you've been around this at a technology level for a long time, and in 10 years, as an example, the capability of what you can do at a price point that you could deliver it at has exponentially changed. Um, so while some of these ideas were kind of cool ideas 10 years ago, you can actually deliver them from a product perspective to the market at a price that people will actually pay.
So,
Um, let let's go to Tim. So Tim, you've been a patient safety guy for a long time. So we just talked about enhanced communication and connecting these things together. How does that come together from a patient safety perspective, and what does that look like going forward?
So as Guy said, there's, and as an Elaine, to bridge these things together, data that's put into the EMR can be utilized to build predictors around a potential risk for patients in a fall situation. If there's a change of medication, for example, if the patient has a lower level UTI, are those potentially now adding to the risk of that patient falling? The answer might be yes. And so that could be built into a predictive model through software analysis and predictive analytics pretty easily. And so I think that this bridging of technology across a communications platform is going to be absolutely critical, and it's going to have to include, I think, data from different sources. One thing we learned at Early Sense was if the caregiver can get to the patient, as Guy said, we saw a reduction of fall rates in the 40-50% range, but that was only if the caregivers were able to get to those patients within a 2-minute period of time. And if you can drive that kind of behavior through data analysis, it's a huge winner, because everyone wants to reduce falls. And I think sharing that data with the people on task of caring for these patients and helping prevent the falls is going to be critical going forward. And so I think data is a big part of this. And I think that, capturing that data, using meaningful data, but not overburdening the staff with a bunch of statistics and data is going to be key. It's got to be simple, and maybe in the form of a dashboard or some other kind of viewing mechanism that they can look at pretty quickly and see where they stand in the benchmarking perspective as well.
So, Elaine, I'm going to have you finish up on this segment. When we're really kind of exploring patient safety, you were a chief nursing officer for a long time. Uh, how does all this come together from a patient perspective at a hospital system, hospital enterprise? The things that you would be thinking about as a CNO.
So, I think the likelihood of staff adopting technology is much greater today than it was some time ago. And that's good, and technology is good. But I think we have to look at this all in a very comprehensive way, and we have to think about it, keeping the patient at the center of the conversation when we're talking about in an acute care or post-acute facility at home. It's, the resident, of course. And we want to think about what the technology will tell us and how it will inform us and change our behaviors to anticipate and to prevent falls in this case. Obviously, as Tim said, no one wants a patient or a loved one to fall. And so you want to do whatever you can do to prevent it. And as a chief nurse, what I was charged with doing, and what I still think is the situation, is identifying the technology that will provide enhanced detection and prevention for falls for our patients, enable our staff to leverage the technology with ease, and be able to build the case and talk about what's in it for each part of this equation. So staff need to understand that it is going to ultimately make the work better and more predictable and with better outcomes for patients. Obviously, they're not going to fall. For the families, they're going to understand that we're doing all we can do to prevent their harm to their loved ones. And ultimately, if we reduce falls, the cost of a fall is not insignificant. Certainly in the acute care hospital, we need to look at the financials here and understand the ROI on any of these investments and what it does when you reduce the number of falls by 20% or 50% in the case of some of this technology. What does that do to the overall performance of the organization? And obviously, first and foremost, patient safety is the most important thing. You have to look at all of the downstream impacts of the intervention that you put in place, and be sure that it's being used and in an optimal way, and that it is delivering on the promise of reducing or preventing falls and improving overall performance across the enterprise.
Great. That was a great answer. So I was going to ask you to follow up, but I'm going to flip this around a little bit. We're going to do a little bit of a lightning round, okay?
Sure.
And the lightning round is we're all involved at some level or other at bringing products that support fall prevention, fall prediction to hospital customers. And there's a lot of people in this space showing up on people's doorsteps with every imaginable solution to all of this. So the lightning round is, tell us 3 things you're going to advise the customer that they should be looking at from a perspective of evaluating and actually acquiring and executing the technology. Guy, you go first.
Yeah, so it has to be passive that allows monitoring in every condition without disturbing the patient. No need for compliance, so that's number 1. Integration to EHR and different interfaces to allow connectivity with other interfaces, and allow to monitor KPIs that actually help you to embed the solution into your day-to-day work. If you have those 3, I believe it's
all right. They're a winner.
Yeah.
Elaine.
I would add to that and say that in terms of assessing and selecting devices or technology, it is critical that you involve the end user in the assessment and the selection process to get the best possible adoption. I think education, once you bring technology into the space, the healthcare space, is critical. And it's not a one and done. You've got to continuously educate, re-educate, evaluate use. And finally, I think it's really very important to take a look at case studies or look at other organizations that have used the given technology to understand what their experiences have been, and let that inform both your selection and how you implement that technology in your own location.
Great answer. Tim, finish this up.
I think the sites have to use benchmarking data to see where they've been versus where they want to go. Improving falls is going to require measurements of things like response time of staff. And I think the technology has to do 2 things, essential to do 2 things. One is reduce alarms from their current systems that they use, because staff alarm fatigue is a real issue. It's a patient safety issue, frankly. And secondly, they have to be able to prove that the technology they are looking at and choosing will absolutely reduce fall rates. It's great to talk about it, but they've got to be able to see it and experience it.
Well, and I'll add in my perspective, which is whoever they are, you as an organization, I'm talking to a customer here, you need somebody you're going to be able to partner with, because there's a lot of this stuff you're not going to be able to do yourself. The best technological, clinical, workflow, informatics experts in the organization, they're critical players in these decisions and in an execution. But there's so much going on outside the healthcare enterprise in terms of knowledge that organizations can't carry themselves. And frankly, I think my experience is that it's hard to do these things because there's never enough time to do it. So by partnering with the right providers, you can get these things done. So we're going to finish up. Tim, any closing thoughts?
I think it's a very exciting time right now in healthcare. I think that, healthcare is very cautious about the adoption of AI and different technologies. And I know there's AI initiatives from the bedside, critical care, predictive analytics perspective, all the way out to insurance interfaces used between insurance companies and the healthcare systems. But I do believe that fall prevention technology is going to be assisted with AI algorithms in a very big way as we go forward. And I think that with the challenges that healthcare systems have with staff shortages, it's going to become a very useful tool for them as they go forward. So.
Great. Guy, closing thoughts?
AI is definitely part of the acceleration towards the solution, moving from reactive medicine to proactive medicine. Eventually, I believe that early detection technologies will enable one step ahead to improve the outcomes.
All right, excellent. So, Elaine, you have the final word.
I would add that given the aging population, at least in the United States, and the potentially catastrophic impacts of a fall, regardless of setting, it is essential that we continue to work to leverage technology to educate not just staff, not just patients, but especially patient families, and consider using these technologies, as Tim indicated, in the home. Consider the utility of that in the home, and that is complicated, but I do believe we need to start to focus on that and think about how we're going to predict and prevent falls in any setting.
Excellent. So thank you all. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you. And thanks to all of you for listening. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe. And if you leave a comment, it really helps the algorithm. Check us out on the web at www.lonestarcom.com/podcast. That's www.lonestarcom.com/podcast. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for listening.